Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Recovery Talk. This is your host, Amalia Lee speaking, and today we are going to talk about body checking. Oh, the dreaded body checking. It's one of those really annoying behaviors that are just there, taking up time, energy, and not giving you anything good back. In this episode, I want to help you maybe understand body checking a bit more and why it happens, and understand a bit what some of the classical triggers and drivers are, and also hopefully offer some practical advice on how to actually target the behavior. So let's get into it. And let's start with actually defining body checking. What is body checking and how does it differ from just, looking yourself in the mirror? Isn't just looking at your body a form of body checking? Not necessarily. It is all about the intention, the frequency, and intensity of the behavior. And if it is something that moves you forward or keeps you stuck. And body checking is one of those behaviors that really keep people stuck, especially when working more around like their body image and letting go of rules, challenging fears and recovery. Body checking is one of those behaviors that a lot of people think is really innocent. Like, oh my God, like what does it matter? It shouldn't really make that much of a difference, should it? Not realizing how much it actually holds them back and reinforce the eating disorder. So what is body checking and how does it differ from just looking at your body? So I like to define body checking as a set of ritualistic behaviors that someone is engaging in to check their body size or body shape, and that it's something that comes from an anxiety mindset. And these behaviors will often be quite automated, but how automated they are also vary a lot. For some, the behaviors are more conscious choices that someone engages in. So just practically speaking, body checking can be obsessively looking at yourself in the mirror and then kind of like turning around, doing different poses, checking different angles. It could also be touching your body in a certain way, pinching skin, feeling for bones. Also muscles as well, like checking, oh, have my muscles grown? But not necessarily in like a healthy way of, ooh, I've been lifting some weights in the gym. Am I getting stronger? It's more like in an obsessive way of, oh my God, am I losing my muscle? What is happening, right? It's a different energy there. For example, maybe you've had a few days off the gym and you're convinced that your muscles are disappearing and that you're gaining a ton of body fat. There's also the comparison element of it. Maybe you're looking at your body and then looking at other people's body and kind of checking. Maybe you're in a room and you're like, am I the smallest person in the room? Am I the biggest person in the room? So you're kind of scanning the room as well. Another form of body checking that perhaps isn't spoken enough about is taking selfies or taking body pictures. Maybe you're checking how your face looks in the front camera. Maybe you're standing your camera up and taking pictures of your body, or maybe you were at an event and pictures were taken of you, so you go and excessively look at your body in those pictures. And a lot of people don't like themselves in pictures or feel like they look bigger in pictures. And camera lenses can really make you look very different from picture to picture, angle to angle, lens to lens as well. So it really can mess with someone if there already is body dysmorphia, if you already have a hard time knowing what you quote unquote really look like. And it's like you try to solve that by looking at the pictures because, if I just look enough, if I just check enough, then I will know. Then I will solve this uncertainty in my brain of not knowing. And this is some of the tragedy with body checking. It doesn't solve the uncertainty. You don't feel better. You don't feel more reassured. Maybe you feel reassured in the moment sometimes, but then you feel less reassured long term. And the more you body check, the more you want to body check. It's not like you just body check once and then you're like, okay, done. I'm never going to do that again. So it's a very self-reinforcing and unhelpful behavior. And in my experience, it often is a behavior that can linger for a while, even when things like food and movement are a lot better. So when it comes to body checking, I like to see there being two main drivers, and that is habit. So more like automated body checking, and also conscious body checking. In my experience, people typically will have both drivers, but someone may find that certain parts of their body checking is more habitual and other parts is more conscious. And it can be important sometimes to know which is which because it can be relevant in terms of the strategies you use to beat the body checking. So let me explain a bit what I mean here and what is the difference between habitual or automated body checking versus conscious body checking. So, as the name may suggest, habitual body checking is body checking that has just become a very ingrained habit. It's almost like brushing your teeth. You don't necessarily think too much about it, or like flushing the toilet. If I asked you, do you remember flushing the toilet? You may be like, I actually don't remember doing it, but I know I did it. And if I were to then ask you to stop flushing the toilet for some very weird reason, that would probably be quite hard because it would be so ingrained in you to just do it, even if you didn't want to or couldn't. And therefore, me telling you more information about why you shouldn't flush the toilet or help figure out why flushing the toilet, why stopping flushing the toilet is so hard for you may not be super helpful if it's just an automated habit. And I think this is where a lot of people go wrong in body checking, is that they treat a automated habit as a conscious one. So let me explain a bit what I mean with a conscious body checking. Conscious body checking is when you are, as the name may suggest, conscious of the behavior, right? So unlike automated habitual body checking, where it's like it happens in such a split second that you can't really like consciously go in and counter argue why you shouldn't do it. Conscious body checking is different. It is you being like, I am body checking now and I need to do it, and then you continue the behavior. So an example of automated body checking could be that you're passing a mirror and you're wearing a t-shirt and you kind of like go and like look at your arms in the mirror and like look at angle. It happens in such a split second as you're passing the mirror that it's going to be quite hard to talk yourself out of it. But conscious body checking, on the other hand, would be you wearing a sweater and then you quote unquote feel fat. And then you take off the sweater and you start feeling your arms, or you walk up to the mirror to look and analyze your arms. Now, as I mentioned, many times body checking is a bit of a combination of both. And also sometimes people may have one behavior is automated and one is conscious. So please don't get too hung up in the binaries here, but just see it overall as body checking is something that can have different trigger for different people in different situations. It can also start as a more like automated body check and then develop into a conscious one. So maybe you just caught a glimpse of yourself in the mirror and then did that split second automated body checking, and then you start consciously body checking after that to investigate further. So now we understand a bit that body checking can be driven by different things, and that at least part of body checking for a lot of people can be driven by being a very ingrained habit. But then what about the more conscious body checking that isn't so habitual? What drives that? One thing I find really interesting here is that everyone wants to stop body checking, right? You don't hear people saying, oh, body checking, such an important part of my life, 10 out of 10, would totally recommend it. Everyone is like, this is annoying, it's miserable, it's taking up time, energy, it's making me stressed out. It's a very typical thing that people enter coaching and want to stop. It's not something people want more of, to put it very simply. But here's the thing. Once I start peeling back the layers, I often see that people who want to stop body checking are actually very afraid of stopping body checking. They're holding on to it. Because oftentimes there's a lot of fear of what would happen if I were to stop this behavior. And a lot of this is subconscious, by the way. It's like everybody wants to stop body checking, but nobody wants to stop body checking. People are holding on to something there. And this something is often controlled. And I know that's a little bit of like a cliche of eating disorders. It's all about control. But there are parts of it that control is a big thing. A lot of times when digging deeper, and I might ask someone, what are you afraid would happen if you don't body check? It is that fear of, oh, what if something happens to my body? What if I'm fluctuating in weight? What if I'm losing control? What if I'm gaining a bunch of weight and I didn't know because I didn't body check enough? So it's essentially often around a fear of losing control of the body. And this is an interesting one because I often see that this is also the case in people who are very committed to recovery, where if they did experience more weight gain or weight fluctuation, they wouldn't actually go back, yet they keep body checking somehow. So the option or the quote unquote solution is off the table, yet you keep checking. Remember this, body checking does not prevent weight fluctuations, right? Weight fluctuations is not something that happens because someone didn't body check enough. And also, the idea that body checking gives you a more realistic perspective of your body and body changes is just not true. It reinforces body dysmorphia. It reinforces that distorted view of your body. Nobody ever said, oh yeah, I had crippling body dysmorphia, but I just body checked enough, so now I'm all good. It's part of the problem, not part of the solution. Body checking may give you a bit of relief in the moment, but long term, it just makes you so much more anxious, so much more body focused, so much more focused on weight and food as well, because you will constantly be in front of the mirror trying to find associations, often where there aren't any. Because your body image will shift drastically, but your body won't really change that drastically on a day-to-day basis, right? So someone may feel amazing in the morning and then they eat more stuff throughout the day and then they suddenly feel really, really bad and like they've gained a bunch of weight. It's just not possible to defy biology that way, but your body perception may shift that significantly. So you already know yourself to be an incredibly unreliable narrator, and you also know that this is reinforced the more you are in your eating disorder. So the question is then, why would listening to that very unreliable narrative and also doing behaviors that take you more into the eating disorder and less away from recovery be a way to get a better, realistic perception of your body so that you can quote unquote control it and prevent it from changing? Like, come on, you thought you gained 10 kilos in one day. Like your perception is completely skewed, and trying to get it to be less skewed by doing more of the exact behavior that is making it more skewed, it's just not going to get you anywhere. And then what if the quote unquote worst case scenario come true? You gain weight. Well, what are you going to do about it? Is going back to the eating disorder really a realistic option? Where would that take you? And why is weight gain the worst option? Isn't weight gain just a necessary part of recovery? Like if your body is desperate to gain weight, it's going to do that whether you body check or not. And I think it is important to kind of recognize this, that it doesn't have the useful function that it tries to tell you that it has. It just keeps you stuck, and it keeps you from having peace with your body, because you can't have peace with something you're so carefully monitoring like it's a dangerous bomb about to go off, where one wrong meal is going to ruin everything. Recovery is about letting go of the control, letting you be, trusting your body. And body checking reinforce the idea that your body is not to be trusted, that it has to be watched like a naughty child. So when listening to this episode, I hope maybe you can identify if conscious body checking is the most pressing issue for you, or if you feel like it is just very automated for you. And something to think about as well is, how afraid are you to stop the behavior? What are you afraid would happen if you didn't body check? And is that worst fear scenario really so bad? Is it realistic? Does body checking really prevent it from happening, or does it just give you an illusion of preventing it? And this is especially relevant if the fear is around body changes or weight gain, which is what body checking typically is about. But it can also apply to more like gym style body checking. So things like checking around muscles and feeling like you're just deflating your muscles by having a rest day. Well, first of all, that's not happening. But second of all, if you were to lose a bit of muscle mass, would that be the end of the world, like realistically speaking? especially if it happens in the context of recovery. Maybe you're taking a bit of a break from the gym to work on your recovery and you're so scared of losing muscles, losing strength. Well, first of all, you probably will overestimate a bit the effect it has. You probably would be thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose all my muscles. I'm not even going to be able to get out of bed, like all of these dramatic worst case scenarios. But even if you do go to the gym and you are a bit weaker and you notice that, yeah, I don't have as muscular arms right now. So what? If you get the beautiful benefit of recovery and can build then yourself to have a better relationship with movement, isn't that worth the trade-off? And same thing about gaining body fat, right? Like, well, yeah, what if you do gain weight? What if you do gain body fat, but you're getting all of these mental and physical benefits? Isn't that worth it, right? Is it worth spending the rest of your life fighting your body's natural weight? For what? Like, what is that giving you? And remember, like I mentioned earlier, these changes are going to happen whether you body check or not. Checking does not prevent or cause certain things or certain changes. It just gives you a false illusion of control. All right, guys. Hopefully now you feel like you understand body checking a little bit better. And now I want to talk about the very important part of this episode, which is what are some more practical tips to reduce or stop body checking? And for that, I want to talk about strategies that is very helpful for more automated or habitual types of body checking, and some strategies that are helpful more for maybe the conscious type body checking. And then I also want to talk about a few strategies that are going to be helpful for either. So for conscious body checking, I find that you have a lot more power in actually interrupting the behavior compared to habitual body checking. So a lot of times, people often can be quite able to just stop the behavior consciously. Some people are able to go almost cold turkey with a lot of body checking behaviors. So if you find that you just realizing, oh wow, I'm body checking, it doesn't serve me, I want to stop it, do that. You don't have to complicate it. So for conscious body checking, it's all about stopping yourself in the moment. And what some people may find to be helpful is replacement behaviors. So instead of body checking, you do something else. Now that can be just like a random behavior. It could be something like going and having a cup of tea, for example, or reading a book or calling a friend. But some may also find that a replacement behavior is more helpful if they're replacing it with something that is similar but not the same, and something that is similar but not harmful. So for example, someone who is trying to stop smoking may find that instead of having a cigarette, they find it helpful to have like a lolly because it is something similar, having something in their mouth. While someone who's trying to stop drinking, they may find that making a cup of tea is quite helpful, more helpful than a lolly would, because it's the same ritual, you're pouring something in the glass. So it's essentially about creating a behavior that is kind of similar, but not the same and harmless. So what would that be for body checking? Well, an example could be maybe you are going to scan your body in the mirror. How about instead just focusing on your haircut for a second, right? Or maybe you're about to feel your body in a disordered way, maybe feeling like how your thighs are feeling, or feeling the bones of your body. Then maybe instead of feeling, let's say, maybe like your ribs or something like your hip bones, how about going to a more neutral bone, right? So feeling your elbows, for example. I know these things can seem like really silly examples, but maybe try them, Don't just knock it off before you tried it. So touching your body, move to touch in a neutral way, or checking in the mirror your body, move to checking a neutral thing like your hair, or maybe checking the nail polish on your toes, right? Of course, in an ideal world, you will check nothing at all, but it can sometimes be a step towards that full freedom. Another thing that can be quite helpful, that probably is going to sound very counterproductive, is to schedule in the body checking or delaying the body checking. So, for example, maybe you're feeling a lot of strong urges to body check, and then you tell yourself, okay, yeah, this evening at 7 o'clock, I'm going to give myself 3 minutes to body check, but I'm going to wait until then, and then I do the behavior. And then, yeah, you can allow yourself to do the behavior at that time, but also maybe by that time, the impulse have gone down. Like you can kind of surf the urge a bit and it will feel really intense and then it goes down. So then maybe when it is 7 o'clock, maybe you don't feel as much of a need to body check. So essentially telling yourself, I can do it, but I will do it later, not right now, can also be helpful. So, a few other behaviors that can also be helpful, and these will probably be a little bit more targeting the automated body checking, but again, automated body checking and conscious body checking often overlap, and sometimes it can be hard to know which is which. So, some of these strategies may seem incredibly random, and people may feel a bit like, oh, is this how I'm going to live the rest of my life? That doesn't sound healthy either. So I want to make it very clear that these are just random things that you're doing for a period of time to break the habit. You don't have to do these things forever. It's just to break the habit loop and rewire your brain. So, one example is wear clothes that make it just practically quite hard to body check. This is especially helpful for body checking that is around like lifting your shirt and maybe checking your stomach or checking your legs, for example, in certain clothing. Wear clothing that just practically adds a few more steps to the behavior. So when you're wearing, for example, like a loose t-shirt, it may just take you a split second to lift it up and check your stomach. But if you're wearing a bodysuit that you have to like go and like untie, or if you're wearing like a maxi skirt or like a jumpsuit or a dungaree or something that you have to take off, it can help break the habit. And then suddenly it goes from being a automated body check to a conscious one. And once it is conscious, you can kind of be a bit more like, okay, do I really want to do this? Do I need to do this now? Could I replace it with a different behavior? Could I delay the behavior or schedule it in for later? So the goal here is to make the automated habit conscious. Another thing, and this is probably a bit more like something you may be familiar with before, is being mindful of the amount of mirrors you have around you, especially full body mirrors. And some people may even find it helpful just for a period of time to cover the mirrors. Sometimes that can feel a little bit drastic for some people and can also be a little bit impractical if they kind of need the mirror for other things. So kind of like an in-between could be maybe even putting something up against the mirror where you can't really see your body, but maybe you can see your face, for example. So if you need it to do your hair, you can still use the mirror. Or maybe putting like a poster in the middle of the mirror, right? So that it's a little bit harder to maybe body check your stomach, right? Essentially, you want to think about how can I make it as impractical as possible for me to body check in the way that I typically body check. There is a bit of a balance here though, because I don't think that treating your body as something hideous that you can't look at and that you have to avoid mirrors at all costs sends the most helpful signaling to your brain. So it's important that you're a bit mindful of that fine line between avoiding excessive mirror exposure versus also not reinforcing to your brain that you need to like be hidden and can't look at the mirror because there will be something so awful there and you can't handle seeing it. But for some people, being a bit careful and a bit more mindful around mirrors may, for some, be a necessary step in breaking habitual body checking, a necessary temporary step, but not something to do for the rest of their lives. And this may go a bit against a lot of traditional body image advice, which tends to recommend exposing yourself to your body in the mirror and looking at it and saying nice things about it. And I absolutely know that this for some people can be very helpful. But I sometimes find that when someone, especially is like in not the best body image space and they're very much obsessed about looking at the body, more body analyzing is maybe not always going to be super helpful. And it also is okay if you don't feel like you have that much good to say about your body in the moment. So much of body image healing comes from building life and meaning and purpose outside of your body. So I think that sometimes those like mirror exercises, even though I understand they can have a lot of value for some people, can for others instead just be really triggering and reinforce body obsession, reinforce the idea that your body and how you look like is very important, and maybe make people feel like they're failing at body image because they're not feeling great about their body. And that's one of the reasons why I prefer taking a bit more of a body neutral approach. I just tend to find that the people who feel the best about their bodies aren't necessarily always the ones that are most focused about their bodies. It often is the people who just live their life and they see their body as more of a vessel rather than all that they are. So to conclude, when it comes to body checking and body image in general, I would say that an important part is not necessarily looking yourself more in the mirror or less in the mirror. It's about finding a better relationship with the mirror. And that can look very different for different people. Now, what are some other strategies to beat the more habitual body checking? So one thing that can be helpful, and this of course can help conscious body checking as well, is speeding things up. And this sounds really random and really impractical, but I've seen a few people that had good results with it. If you actually make it quite logistically hard to body check because you do not have time to body check, that can make things a bit easier, right? Maybe you are a morning body checker and you spend a lot of time before work or before you're going to school body checking. Maybe actually turning the alarm so that you do not have much time in the morning and you kind of just have to rush to work or school can be helpful. Again, incredibly impractical behavior long term that I wouldn't recommend. But for a period of time, it can maybe be helpful to break the habit by actually not giving yourself time in the morning to do it. Of course, if you're doing this specific behavior, it's important that body checking is what you deprioritize, not other things such as eating breakfast. But other similar strategies that fall under the speeding things up category could be maybe having a timer on how quickly you can shower if you have a tendency to body check in the bathroom mirror, or maybe scheduling in your shower right before you know your roommate's soon going to need the bathroom. So again, you don't really have time. Again, what you want to think about is making body checking as inconvenient as possible, making it as likely as possible to go from being habitual to conscious. Another replacement behavior I want to mention real quick is for people who have a tendency to body check through pictures, so taking selfies, for example. Try taking a picture of something else. So you're about to take a selfie, then flip the selfie camera around and take a picture of the wall. This can be helpful if you tend to face check through selfies, for example. Or you're going to take pictures of your body. Again, flip the camera around, take a picture of something else. And another replacement behavior could be maybe you're in a social situation and you're really body checking and focusing on other people's bodies and comparing it to your own. Can you focus on something else with other people? Maybe something completely random, like who's the tallest person in the room or who's the shortest person in the room? I guess some people could argue that can be a form of body checking, especially for people with a lot of dysmorphia around their height. But if that is not really a field of dysmorphia, that could be an example. Or maybe even looking at their hair or guessing like, ooh, what are their star signs? Like something completely random that keep your brain a bit distracted. Or even better, do a room check or a house check. Like, ooh, I wonder where this floorboard is from, right? Oh, okay, what colors are the walls? Like looking at other things in the room. So body comparison in general is probably a bit more, it's such a wide topic that is something that deserves an episode on its own. But for now, what I know a lot of people find helpful is to have certain like pre-saved mantras in your brain that you use to just remind yourself when you are in these situations where you feel that urge to compare. So something like, everybody is different, comparison is the thief of joy. Also, some people may find it helpful to have something that isn't necessarily like a mantra focused on bodies, but just something like telling themselves, stop, we're not doing that, to interrupt the behavior. Think about your brain as like a TV channel where you can actually change the channel. So like, okay, we're not doing this comparison thing now. We're changing the channels to something else, something more productive. Last one that is so incredibly important is to be aware of your own triggers. When do you body check the most? When is the urge the strongest? Just because something triggers body checking, don't make it immediately bad. There are some really good things that may trigger body checking, such as, eating a fear food, right? You don't want to stop eating fear foods because it triggers body checking. But there are some things that may be a bit neutral and other things that may be just inherently bad. And those are more the things that you can work on targeting. So here is an example. Wearing really tight clothing is not inherently bad or good, right? But you may find that when you are very deliberately trying to get rid of body checking, wearing very tight, revealing clothing may just not be for you at this stage in life. This does not mean that for the rest of your life, you should avoid wearing tight clothing if that is actually something that's part of your style and how you like to express yourself. But if you find that as of right now, it's just making you body check so much and feel so insecure, then it is okay to instead just wear something you feel more comfortable with, especially if it's something that makes you less likely to body check. On the topic of clothing, another example of a behavior that we could probably put this one in the unproductive bucket. So behaviors that you're doing that just don't really help you or serve you and your recovery. That could be having a bunch of old clothing that you know that you don't fit anymore. They're not supposed to fit you, but you're refusing to let them go and you keep trying them on. Great example of a behavior that you're doing that you could probably just stop that behavior, right? So wearing, for example, tight clothing, if you're someone who really likes wearing tight clothing, I don't think that's a good thing to stop forever because you're scared it may trigger body checking. But if it is you trying on too tight clothing that fit you during your eating disorder and you're refusing to size up because you are really attached to being that size, that's a different story. So what you could try doing is listing your triggers and then separating them into 3 categories. And I know that these categories are going to overlap. It's not always as clear cut. Something may be a bit in between. But think about it as the 3 categories being helpful for recovery, kind of neutral for recovery, and unhelpful for recovery. So triggers that are helpful for recovery could be something like restoring weight or something like challenging fear foods. So yes, they may be body checking triggers, but they're so helpful for your recovery that it's important to still do them. And then you have the neutral ones. This could be something like wearing very tight clothes, right? Where it's like, you know what? It's actually something that long term you may want to do, but right now may not be the time for it. Lastly, then you have the things that are just unhelpful for recovery. So something like holding on to too small clothing, or also certain forms of social media usage could fall into this category because that's a huge one. A lot of times when I explore with clients about when they feel the most triggered in terms of body checking, they will often say that it happens more after having been spending time on social media or after following certain social media accounts. So really pay attention to that as well. So then focus on still doing the things that are helpful for your recovery, even if it may bring up some body checking. But the things that are neutral, maybe you can pause them for a little bit. And the things that are really unhelpful, just stop them. The things that are triggering your body checking and also making your life worse in other arenas or just pointless, latches you onto your eating disorder, don't do those things. Some people may find that taking a couple of days where they are writing down when they body check and what happened before it can be very helpful. If you find it a bit hard to know exactly what your trigger are, there may be some patterns emerging that maybe you weren't quite aware of. And that can also be a very practical behavior in terms of scheduling in certain things to do after the trigger. So imagine, for example, that your trigger is eating a meal. Then maybe that could be a good time to just coincidentally schedule in a call with a friend, or start a new puzzle, or maybe move yourself away from your bedroom where you're the most likely to body check and instead spend some time in the living room with your family, your partner, or your housemate. And also have self-compassion here. This is not a super easy behavior to stop for everyone. Some people find that they're more able to just be like, I'm done and go cold turkey. And that is awesome. But other people may find that it's not so linear. They may find that they have to kind of reduce it a bit gradually instead, or that they try and it's still pretty hard. The urges come up, the behavior creep in. Just have some patience with yourself that you are essentially rewiring a very deeply ingrained habit and you are essentially facing what may be a pretty significant fear. It doesn't always happen overnight, and that is okay. That doesn't mean that you're not progressing. Of course, you don't want to be complacent either, but remember that small progress is still progress. If you can reduce your body checking by 10% and then 20% and then 30%, that is amazing. Because I sometimes see people having a very black and white mindset around recovery, where if something doesn't happen immediately, they feel like they're failing recovery, that recovery is not for them. And instead of using that as a reason to, I guess, do recovery harder, they use it as a reason to stop recovery, why dropping out of the race is a better option for them. What is pretty common in recovery is that different things rewire in a different timeline. So a lot of people may find that there are certain fear foods that they're able to rewire pretty quickly, but then there are other things, like for example, body image, that may take a little bit longer. Now, here is some very good news for the body checkers who may be feeling a little bit discouraged and a bit hopeless. And that is that body checking is also one of those behaviors that also tends to often gradually taper off with time as you become more recovered. Don't get me wrong, it does often require a bit of conscious work, especially if it's become a very ingrained habit, but it also tends to just naturally lessen to some extent for a lot of people. And that's because when you feel more free about your body, there's not really anything that you feel an urge to check anymore, right? You don't feel like you need to seek out that control because you're at peace. If someone has just had an intruder breaking into their home, then yeah, they're probably going to double and triple check that the door is locked over and over for a period of time. But then with time, as they start feeling a lot more safe in their own space, they may notice that they just checked that it was locked once, or they may even realize, oh wow, I didn't double check the door last night, right? So the safer you feel in your body, the more confident you feel in your recovery, the less urges typically there will be to body check. So think of body checking as a symptom. Maybe it's a symptom that there's still a lot of fear that your body is changing and that you still want to hold on to that control and maybe haven't fully let go yet. Or maybe it's a symptom that there are just some behaviors that you haven't rewired yet, right? That can also happen. And then once those things are better, then body checking tends to improve as well. And remember, even if you do have, when you start really peeling back the layers, some mixed emotion about actually letting go of the behavior, remember that nobody ever regretted stopping body checking. And to sum up the strategies that I have spoken about, delay, replace, complicate. So delaying the behavior, whether you're telling yourself you'll do it later or scheduling it in for a certain period of time, or replacing the behavior, doing something else, maybe something that's similar but not quite the same, or complicate. Complicate is a big one. Make it practically harder for yourself to body check. Work on interrupting the loop. Make the unconscious conscious and be aware of your triggers. All right, everyone, thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of this episode. Feel free to leave a rating for this podcast or share with a friend. Also, if you don't already follow the podcast, I would recommend you do that because that means that you will get notified when new episodes are out. I do try to release every second week, so keep an eye on that. And for anything coaching related, head over to my website, letsrecover.co.uk. I will see you guys in the next episode. And until then, keep fighting the good fight.